Hello, and welcome to Monumental, where we sit down with entrepreneurs, leaders, visionaries, and big thinkers making monumental change. Here's your host, Evan Holiday.
Welcome back to Monumental. I'm your host, Evan Holiday, and today on the show we have Jimmy Granbery. Jimmy, how are you doing?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Great. So glad to have you on here. You and I had actually worked previously in your role as a board of commissioner on the with MDHA, the Housing Authority and Local Development Agency here in Nashville.
Well, they got it going on, don't they?
Yeah.
It's great to see.
Yeah. So now I was like, well, Jimmy's got a lot going on, and so does his company, HG Hill Realty. And I was like, we got to get Jimmy on the show.
All right, let's go. Here I am.
Yeah. Well, let's just jump right in. So how did you get your start? I know your company has a very long history, a very long family history with over 100 years. How did you get your start in the company and then also into real estate?
Well, we, back when we had the stores, during the summers I would work, as a sack boy. I had some various stints at Belmont and Gale Lane. I worked at 21st and Blair, 21st and Blakemore, just a sack boy, part-time. So that was kind of my start. Then when I got out of college, I decided to go to work for the company, and there really wasn't an emphasis on the real estate. It was more the grocery business. That's what we were doing. And so they said, we're going to put you in a training program, whatever that meant. It wasn't anything, specifically documented, but it just kind of happened. So they handed me my little stamping gun and my red apron and said, we want you to report to George McGraw in Donaldson and take it from there.
Wow.
And I said, well, that's great. Where's Donaldson? I was a West Nashville boy.
Wow.
I'd never heard of Donaldson. It was across the world, and so I went to Donaldson and I worked there for a couple years in every aspect of the grocery business.
Did I read that you were getting paid like $5 an hour?
$5 an hour was my starting pay with a college degree. I thought I'd hit the jackpot. But I did everything. I sacked groceries, I worked stock, I was trained in the meat department, I trained in the produce department, I worked nights, I worked the back door, I worked, you name it, I did it all. And then and I kind of jumped around. I was assistant manager on 21st. I was assistant manager because one of our guys got sick. I was out in Madison, and so I kind of did it all. And then they moved me into what was the Realty company, mid-'80s, early '80s really, and there really wasn't, we basically managed the real estate with a primary emphasis on taking care of the grocery store. And at that point in time, we had started, we built a new center, Gallatin Road at Eastland, which is now an Aldi. We built a new center in Brentwood, which is now Fresh Market, REI, which was originally McClure's, and then I left for a couple years and went out to a true real estate developer, and worked for 2 or 3 years just to kind of get some experience outside of our little bubble. And my boss at the time had taken early retirement. His health wasn't great, so they invited me back to the company, and I came back in probably '86 or so, and I don't remember the exact year, but came back and we'd doing a little bit more. We'd built a couple more centers, one in Hermitage and one on Knowles Road, and so there was a little bit more emphasis on true real estate property management, but it really wasn't anything like what we see today, obviously. And then in '93, Mr. Hill died, and we really kind of started ramping up the real estate. And in '99, when we sold the store operations, then we really took it to another level. And then my boss retired, and I took over in 2002, which seems like yesterday. And since then, you can look at the list of all the things we've done, and there's a lot on here that we did, but it's not really part of it. One of the big transactions we did, we took the old home place and developed it into the subdivision, which was really outside the box for what we were doing, because primarily we were doing retail. And
so how big was that subdivision?
well, it was 99 lots, but it required a rezoning per se, replatting, and it was a big stretch, because it was a multi-million-dollar transaction
Right.
just to put the infrastructure in, and we didn't build any of the houses.
Wow.
So it was pretty exciting.
So going back to when you first started the real estate development, was it mainly centered around where the grocery stores were at that your company already had in place?
Yeah, well, kind of the two big things. When we sold the operation, we obviously kept the real estate, and so you had a lot of these suburban type shopping centers that we just kind of maintained. We had modified them a little bit, but not dramatically. But in Brentwood, we converted to a Whole Foods. Obviously, we hadn't bought the additional land in Green Hills and Belmead. We knew we were going to redevelop those, so we didn't agree to operate the store more than 5 years with the new owner-operator group. It's complicated, but because we knew we were going to do what we ultimately did.
Right.
We didn't know how we were going to do it, but we knew we were going to do something at the end of 5 years. So long about 2003, we started really looking at, okay, what are we going to do and how are we going to do it? And what you see in Green Hills was years of planning and studying and
Right.
benchmarking trips and consulting and whatnot. And the funniest part about that, we kind of sort of thought we wanted a grocery store, but we didn't know who it was going to be. And we talked to some obvious suspects, but Whole Foods called and said, we'd really like to go there. And I responded, well, what do you do? I mean, it was Whole Foods at that point
Really?
was so new in the
What
game.
year was that? Do you remember?
2003 or so.
Wow.
They had some stores in Atlanta, but we just weren't familiar with it.
Right,
we were
right.
more familiar with your traditional grocery store operator.
Yeah. So was it when you all first got started with doing more of the real estate development side? Was it because of your love of real estate, or was it because of also you just seeing an opportunity based on the real estate that your family already owned?
Well,
Or both?
yeah, a little of both. I think from the real estate point of view, we owned all our real estate,
Right.
even though we operated the stores, and that started back from my great grandfather when he first got into the business. He rented, and he wanted to expand the store. He wanted to paint the building a different color. He wanted to do some things different, and the landlord wouldn't let him do it. So he decided that if he was going to control his own destiny, the best thing for him to do was own his own real estate. So he found a store. We still own the property at 18th and State, and he went to the landowner and said, "I want to buy this location," and it was a defunct grocery store, and the owner said, "What do you want to do?" And he said, "Well, I'm going to start a grocery company." And the guy, the landowner, said to Mr. Hill, he said, "Well, the last guy that tried to own a grocery store, the rats ate him out of business." And Mr. Hill responded, "If I'm not smart enough to fool a rat, I don't deserve to be in business." So he bought the store, and the rest is kind of history, as how he grew the store operations, in Middle Tennessee.
So what has drawn you all into the type of development you are doing now with the Hill Centers all across greater Nashville, where it's very mixed use? It's almost like a community center, and it literally draws people in for entertainment, for going out to eat, for meeting up, for socializing, and also even for living and
Right.
creating that.
Well, whatever the piece of property, it doesn't matter. You look at the highest and best use based on its then current zoning, and if it's not zoned properly, you look to potentially get it rezoned if the community will accept what you're doing. So it's just the highest and best use. And you know, obviously, even what we did in Green Hills, you know, when we did it, we thought we were going to put residential in there, but the money wasn't right. The rents weren't good enough to support the cost of building it, so we just went with what we did, and it's turned out pretty good. We have second phase opportunities to do residential, and we ultimately will, just because of what's happened to people wanting to live, work, and play in the same location. And it's really about obviously the highest and best use, but you know, the data is overwhelming. If you create a place, you know, no matter what that place is, and people enjoy it, they'll come back more often. If they come back more often, that means they spend more money and your tenants are more successful.
Right.
So it's all about placemaking, you know, and it just had, you know, and the land, I mean, you know, no deal is ever going to be the same because the land is always different. There's no absolute cookie cutter formula to say this is what we're going to do, but you try to sort of, you know, follow the same principles, you know, place and, you know, quality of life enhancement for your, you know, your shoppers. I mean, that's what it's all about. You know, you could build Green Hills in the middle of Humphreys County, and I don't think it would be very successful because there's nobody that would really come to it.
Right.
So it's a pretty simple formula, but you know, a lot goes into, you know, the land. In Brentwood, for example, you know, what we did there was we tried to create a place. Brentwood is, you know, you got North Brentwood and you got South Brentwood and a lot of residential in between. There's really no downtown Brentwood like Franklin, or Gallatin or Springfield. There's where they got the city hall and the town square and all that. So we tried to create a place, and I think we've been very successful at it. That people will continue to come back to. You've got the right tenant mix. You've got the right restaurants. You've got, you know, it's easy to park. It's easy access. All those parts of the formula that make, you know, the property successful. We'd love to have residential in Brentwood, but the zoning doesn't allow it.
So that brings up a good question that I had was, as far as you said, the formula is simple, but there is a lot of work that goes into it on the front end, and it almost sounds like you're doing, you know, like the 80% of planning on the front end, and then the execution afterward, but you're spending a ton of time in the planning phase.
Well, and when you say planning, it's not just who the tenants are going to be. You know, what you don't realize in Brentwood, for example, is that from the corner of Franklin Road and Maryland Way to the southwest corner of the property is 70 feet of gradient. Well, that doesn't make for a very pedestrian-friendly environment to have people.
Right, to have that big of a slope.
So how do you make that up? What do you do to make that up? And we did I think a really good job of balancing and placing the buildings, and so the tabletop where all the pedestrians are going in and out of stores and out of restaurants is relatively flat, and it makes it a more enjoyable. I think, you know, people would say that San Francisco is a fun town, but it's pretty hard to walk.
Yeah, exactly.
Pretty hard to navigate. That's
a great point. So how much are you relying on experts or consultants or your team?
100%. I mean, that's the key to the success. Is we're no better than the people we hire to help us along the way, whether it be our civil engineer or our architect or our, you know, traffic engineer, or all those people that play into the whole formula. And we meet, and you know, it just doesn't all of a sudden happen. And you go through multiple iterations of how it all works, and then you get into the construction side, and then you say, well, if you raise the elevation a foot, you save $200,000 because you don't have to haul off as much fills. Okay, well, let's do it. You know, that is a simple answer to the question of, you know, without compromising the integrity.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. In our work in development, it really does come down to relying on experts, because, I mean, you and I don't know about civil engineering. I mean, we have a good idea based on our experience, but we're not actually understanding.
Well, I think it helps, you know, with our years of experience and the people on our team, you know, we're asking all the right questions, and there's a lot of collaboration between the civil engineer and the landscaping engineer and the architect and the engineer and the traffic engineer and And then you get into zoning, then you get into codes, then you get into, what's allowed, what's not allowed, how it works, and then you get into water quality. So all these pieces of the puzzle, when you scramble it all up, it has to come together, because you've got to meet the water quality situations. You've got to have the where is NES going to connect to make the lights come on? Where is the sewer line going to connect? And you can't have the sewer line above your connection point, because then it doesn't flow uphill. So I mean, all those things come into to play as you plan and you look at it.
And the main thing I want to point out that you brought up was ask the right questions, or at least ask enough questions so that it uncovers the truth, right?
Correct. And I think too, the architect might be talking, and the civil engineer might say, well, that doesn't work. And so then you have to work it out.
Right.
And so you've got, anytime we have the development team together, it's everybody. It's not just one or two of us, it's everybody. So everybody's hearing the conversation. They might not be involved in the conversation, but they're hearing the conversation, so they know what the issues are and then how it's all going to play out.
So going into, you mentioned like picking out the tenants, that's something that is very foreign to me, as far as, I do all residential, but I would love to know more, like how do you curate a good mix of tenants, and then also how do you convince the right tenants to get in there to make it that
well, hopefully it works the other way, because we've got such great locations and built such great projects that they're coming to us.
Right.
But that's not always the case, and sometimes you've got to sort of say, okay, we really want a XYZ company. So you say, okay, who are those people in that world, and then you target them and go for them. I mean, there's, do the math. There's only so many grocery operators in this market, right? So you kind of know who your world is, and if you're building a grocery anchored mixed use development, and there's your competitors across the street, well, but he might want to come over, but if he's in a brand new store, it doesn't really make much sense for him to move.
So, and you've developed a lot of those relationships over the years.
And we have, we have experts in the the high-end retail field. We have experts in the we kind of do our grocery deals ourselves, but the shop retail, we have really good people working in that field for us, and then in office, you kind of know when, if you're doing some office, who's out there, who's looking to move, who's needing more space, and then once you sort of put your project out on the street, then people start calling, hey, I've got a tenant that, how does the timing work, and it sort of falls into place.
Right. So, like we mentioned before, your company has a very long history, has gone through many generations of the family. What in your eyes has led to that longevity of the company and the success of the company over the years?
That's a really tough question. I think we've just, certainly through this stretch, there's just really such good family harmony. Everybody likes everybody. Everybody's, for the most part, local. We get along. We're not only family, but we're friends. And so, and then obviously, if you're successful, it makes it a little easier to go to Christmas dinner, right?
Yes.
As opposed to not being successful.
So have you set up any like principles or rules?
There's all sorts of policies relative to all of that. Employment policies, that are, as far as if you're a family member, all that's in place, and so you have to earn it. I mean, it's just there's not a right just because you're in the family to come to work here.
Yeah.
And there's really not, we don't have that many employees per se, like in the grocery days where you had it was awful easy.
Right.
In my generation, if you wanted to work in the summer, there were plenty of jobs to be had. We don't have that now. We'll make it available to you if you want to work on a landscaping crew. We have crews, and we'll say, they're all hiring, so it's not a real hard thing to do.
So what would be your advice to somebody, one of our listeners, that has a company now, but really wants that company to be in place for the next 100+ years?
Well, I think you have to have a plan. You have to have clear-cut rules and policies for family members, and just and there's no magic formula. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It depends. I mean, our company, there's multiple stockholders. It's not a one-man show,
right?
Which is a whole lot different than, say, what if I own the company 100% outright, well, I could hire my children if I wanted to, right? So I think it's all about being fair. One thing that's really been exciting for me to watch is that in my children's generation, there are over 30 kids. Now, obviously, a couple of them, one of them in particular is pretty young, maybe just removed from being in diapers, but then there's my niece is the oldest, and she's 35 years old. And now there's, a half a dozen grandkids, great-grandkids in the 6th generation. But, all these kids, that are out of college and, maybe have got a secondary degree, are doing what they want to do. They're, being a librarian, or they're being an environmental engineer, or they're in the, the residential real estate business, or the commercial real estate business, or secondary education, they're teaching. And so they're all doing what they want to do, which is, they're just not hanging around waiting for a job. So if they want to work here, there are opportunities, but, if we're hiring a corporate counsel that deals
right.
with real estate, obviously you don't qualify for that just because you're a family member, unless you've got a law degree and have experience in the real estate business.
Right.
So it sort of works itself out in that realm, because if you're hiring a CPA, well, if you're not a CPA, you don't even
right
qualify. So it kind of
recently I read a book, Skyscraper Dreams. It's a very, very good book, especially for those that are in real estate and real estate development. It was written in the early 90s, and it was all about the families of New York over the last 150 years, and how they've created these real estate dynasties over the years, and how they've been able to pass on from generation to generation for some families. But then some families have not been able to have that success because after a few generations, maybe the interest dies out, or there's lack of leadership or certain things. But it was just interesting to see how some families were able to really continue that longevity, and also just how they were able to work together and create some of the the biggest skyscrapers in New York.
Yeah. I mean, I think I know that whether our any of the family members work here, which they don't, but they're also extremely proud of what the company has done, and we encourage our family and our employees to shop with our tenants. I mean, they're paying the rent,
right,
and adding the value. So please shop with our tenants. If it's at all possible. Now, granted, we don't own but one car dealership, so it's sort of hard to say that you've got to buy this type of car. But there are plenty of grocery store opportunities. There are plenty of soft good opportunities, and we have a lot of restaurants. We don't have obviously you go to other restaurants, and I get it, but try to patronize our folks.
Right. So going into Nashville as a city, and your experience here and over the years, and you've seen Nashville change over the last few decades, what do you see as being Nashville's future, and how does a city like Nashville stay relevant for decades to come?
Well, I mean, I think in my world, there's still this unique aspect about Nashville and the brand of Music City, and there are just certain parts of Nashville that have changed, but I don't know that they've changed dramatically, and one would hope that would sustain over time. Who knows? I mean, it's hard to tell. I think for those that have ever worked downtown, to work downtown is far different now than what it was like 10 years ago. I mean, 10 years ago there was no residential downtown, and that's obviously
it's a lot more bustling.
changed.
It's a lot louder.
Correct. Yeah. So, that's a really tough question. I would hope that it would maintain its charm. I mean, you have certain pockets of town that I don't think are ever going to change. The zoning won't allow it, and you've got the suburbs that have sort of withstood the test of time. But time marches on. A lot of people would say Nashville's far different today than it was 10 years ago and 20 years ago, and that's true. But in my world, I just I see it, but I don't feel it.
Yeah.
Per se.
So going into your developments across Nashville, so you have you've developed in 12 South, you developed Sylvan Park, Brentwood, looking at Germantown, Gallatin Pike, and you're not to mention many others on top of that. But it seems like you're really honing in on the up and coming or the developed neighborhoods and creating these mixed use developments. Are there other parts of town that you're looking at?
Well, one thing that we, have really put a strong emphasis on is, we haven't gone out and tried to recreate the wheel. We own all these properties, so why not make them bigger and better than, Germantown's a vacant piece of land, so it's really not that hard to make it bigger and better, right?
Right.
But we owned it, and it's legacy property, and so why not make it into its highest and best use? Brentwood, we had our existing strip center that we've enhanced, and the tenant mix is far different than when we built it. But then the 17 acres next to it came available, and we bought it, and it, seamlessly has kind of tied together, and we're still working on it. We still got another phase to go, and so I think you continue to look at the legacy properties, and if there's a way to enhance those by buying contiguous property, we'll always consider that. What we owned in Franklin was 1 acre and 1.5 acre, and we bought the rest of the shopping center. Now we've got 5 acres.
Yeah.
So it's now a really nice developable piece of property that we're looking at, as well as Germantown and East Nashville, and then you start adding on. Dixon Road is coming along, where we've got a big piece of property there that is just kind of the old traditional strip center with the grocery store and a bank, and Hendersonville and other properties on Gallatin Road and Knowlesville Road. So you just what you think is a fairly new piece of property is now a 40-year-old strip center, and it's probably primed to be redeveloped.
Right.
But then you've got the issue of there are existing tenants, and they have leases and they have rights, so you just can't say, well, it's time to get out, we're going to redevelop this, and so you have to sort of wait them out in some regards.
So with your developments that you're working on, like we talked about along the corridors, are you starting to look at new properties and acquiring new properties that are not adjacent to your existing properties?
Typically not. That's just, in our opinion, not a real good use of our capital, because we have so many opportunities on existing properties we own to, develop.
And is all the land that you have owned, or you currently own, did it start out as a grocery store or something in the grocery store chain?
Yep. I'd say 95%. There are a few scattered pieces of property that were bought, for a future potential development. Maybe hadn't been something, but most of them, it's some part of the overall piece of property used to house a grocery store, and then we bought the contiguous properties and enhanced the holdings.
That is, honestly, from my perspective, it's just pretty amazing to me that how your company has transformed and pivoted, and been able to go from a successful grocery store chain throughout the greater Nashville area to one of the best mixed-use developers in the greater Nashville area, and doing some of the most high-level projects across the city. It is pretty amazing. It's something that I want to emulate, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners do too, is creating these unique experiences and these mixed-use experiences.
Well, that's what makes it fun. I mean, like I said earlier, every piece of property is different. And there are certain parts of those pieces of property that you just cannot change. You're not moving Maryland Way, you're not moving Franklin Road, you're not moving Gallatin Road, you're
Right.
not. So there are some very defined boundaries. You can shift the topography, but you're really not changing the topography too dramatically.
Right.
You know, it is what it is. So how do you work within those boundaries? And you know, what are your connection points? What are your, you know, points of, you know, where do you place the buildings? How do you place the buildings? You know, what's the, the underlying conditions of the property? Rock, pretty prominent in Middle Tennessee.
Oh, yeah.
So, you know, how does that restrict you? How vertical do you want to go? How vertical can you go? You know, there are obviously a lot of restrictions. Germantown not only has, you know, the zoning laws, but they also have the historic overlays. You know, so then you get into Brentwood, you have, you know, very strict zoning laws, especially when you back up to residential. So how do you work within those boundaries and make it viable? And then you know, you're transparent. I mean, there's only so much we can do to accommodate within, you know, our rights and within the economic parameters of a deal that you say, well, finally, look, if that's what you want me to do, it just doesn't work, so we're not going to do it. So this is what we're willing to do. This isn't a threat. This isn't, you know, this is just the cold hard facts. This is what we can do.
Right.
And do you like it or not?
Right.
If you like it, you know, we'll do it first class and we'll be a good neighbor, but you know, there's only so much we can do.
Yeah, and I think it's so interesting what like this placemaking that you all are doing with the Hill Centers. It goes back to what you said. I think it was your great-grandfather that you said he wanted to control his own destiny and he wanted to own the real estate under the grocery stores.
Right.
And it was almost like he was planting the seed for the real estate
I
company.
think he did it without knowing he was doing it.
Yeah.
I think, you know, I don't, you know, I said the other day I was accepting an award at the Y, and I said, you know, I think Mr. Hill Sr. and Jr., who were both very involved with the YMCA, Mr. Hill Sr. more so than Mr. Hill Jr., but, you know, the question is, what would Mr. Hill Senior or Junior think about what's going on right now? And I think they would both have different opinions. You know, one of them was a lot more aggressive and risk taker than the other. So I think they would have different opinions, but I think they would both be proud of what we've accomplished and how we've maintained the legacy of the Hill name and the family component, and then also parlaying that to the Y. We've made a lot of changes at the Y over the years, and I think they would be equally proud of where the Y is, that it's been able to sustain and is still providing the same services that it was, you know, sort of mission driven to do in the beginning.
Yeah, that brings up a good point. So we met through MDHA. You served on the board there. You're now on the board at the airport here in Nashville. Two very important organizations that are literally shaping the city of Nashville. And you are giving your time and energy and effort and brain to help these organizations and move the city forward. So I commend you for both putting in your service to the city through your developments, not only that, but through your service on the boards. How has that played into, I guess, how have you developed and how has that helped the city develop?
Well, you know, when the mayor or the governor or whoever asks you as a private citizen to serve on a volunteer commission or board, I mean, I don't think you can say no, and I think it's equally as important to have a seat at the table in those organizations that, you know, obviously, you know, I mean, the success of MDHA is paramount to the success of Nashville, which is paramount to the success of our company.
Exactly.
So, I mean, I think it allows you to, help drive the story and the whole, way that all that stuff, look at what Envision Casey's doing. I mean, that obviously now it's really starting to ramp up, but when we hired now current executive director Jim Harbison, he brought to us the RAD conversion, which none of us understood, and now we've converted all our properties, and now the Envision process is really ramping up at Casey, but it's going to start ramping up the other ones when the under one roof gets implemented. And we'll all look back in 10 years and say, how transformative that was
right.
to Nashville. I mean, not just the people that are living there, but the people that live around it, and the people that work there, and it's sort of the whole big
yeah.
piece. Instead of where we were and status quo was really just not an option. I mean, the facilities are old, they're tired, they're in terrible disrepair, and they're expensive to maintain, but they're these beautifully located pieces of property, and a lot of them. I mean, Casey's over 50 acres.
Yeah,
and
right near the heart of downtown.
Right near the heart of downtown, but you've got kids going to school, kids going to play, and then all tides rise.
Yeah.
If you get it right, and I think the way they're going about it and the way it's happening is just going to be fabulous for Nashville.
Yeah, and I can hear it in the way you're talking about it. You're very
I'm
passionate about it.
I wish I was still there, but it's fun to watch from the outside. To see it kind of happen, because I can remember the search committee when we hired Jim, and we kind of slogged along, and then all of a sudden it started getting some momentum, and the Nashville got its momentum, and here we are, and
yeah.
I'd love to live to see it all come together. I mean, it's going to take time, and that's the hard part, is because it's awful easy to build something on a blank piece of paper, but in that particular case, you've got to build 100 new units and move 100 people, then tear that building down, and so it's the whack-a-mole issue of trying to get it done. So they'll get it done. I mean, they got a great team over there, and now the money's there. HUD, they took ownership of a lot of really prime real estate, and a lot more real estate than is owned by anybody in the urban core, and so they can make it happen. Yeah,
I think you're right. And I love what you said. You said it's paramount that everything in a city is so connected.
Oh, absolutely.
And
I mean,
what you're doing, what MDHA, the housing authority is doing, what the city's doing, all the other developers, public, private, nonprofit, like it's all interrelated, and we can all benefit each other if we're serving each different part of the community.
Well, one of the things we learned in Green Hills, and what we were proposing to do, was pretty cutting edge. And one of our consultants, he said, "Look, you don't want to go into an area and say, okay, I'm going to build my little world. I'm going to put a barbed wire fence around it. If you can come in, great. If you don't, great. You want to be connected."
Yeah.
So, I hope Bandywood's doing better in Green Hills because of what we did. I hope across the street is doing better because of what we did.
Right.
So it's all, you become part of the district, and then if everybody's successful, then great. But you're just a piece of that puzzle, and so you got to go into it saying that, sure, I'm going to have competition down the street, but that's great because if they can't find it here, they can go there,
exactly.
and hopefully you can walk there and you don't have to get in your car, and look at this, what we've done in the success of the Green Hills Y. I mean, it's one of the largest, fastest growing Ys in the United States, and certainly in Middle Tennessee. And I have to think that having Whole Foods right across the street is very helpful to what they're doing.
You're exactly right. So what has been, or what do you see as right now as being one of your biggest obstacles in your company?
Oh gosh, biggest obstacles. I have to think this is probably true with a lot of developers. I think just the capacity to get something done with the construction costs as expensive as they are, and manpower as short as it is, and then your tenants to be able to staff up once they get it built. I just think that's a huge. I think the deals. I mean, I know that people are hesitant sometimes about doing deals just because they don't have the manpower to staff them. So why build another location if I can't staff the one I got? And so I think the cost of, it's just, I don't think anybody that's in this business would say that construction costs are their biggest surprise and obstacle, and just how you get it done in a timely manner.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think, one of our biggest obstacles right now is being able to not only just filter through all the deals and get to the ones that are really going to make the most sense, but then also once you have the deals that make the most sense, then it's going through the process of planning, rezoning, permitting, entitling, and you're right, construction costs, and really penciling out those numbers.
Well, if we can avoid the entitlement process, we will.
Yeah, no, I could not agree more.
I mean, it's just so contentious now, and a lot of effort that goes into it. Even if you're going to do the right thing, it's just if we can avoid it, we will.
Yeah. That was our motto for a while, and then we couldn't find any more.
Well, I mean, sometimes you don't have a choice.
Exactly.
But yeah, we will avoid it if we can.
So, being in Nashville with other top level developers like yourself, do you have like a mastermind or people that you bounce ideas off of outside of the company?
A lot of your ideas and thoughts just come from here again back to what's the highest and best use, and then sort of working backwards, and then you get your consulting team together and talk about it. Then you talk to prospective tenants and what they want, so I don't know that it's I'm going to talk to Bob over here about this, or it's sort of a collective culmination of years of experience and available resources, and it really always starts with well, what's permitted, what can I do, and then you start talking to tenants and what they want to do and how they back into it.
So have you had mentors along your way?
Oh, I don't think there's been a specific number of folks. I think it's just been a lot of available resources through ULI, through ICSC, through benchmarking, going to other cities. You're always going to other cities, and you think, God, why'd they do that, or what's that, and then so I think it just kind of falls into place, through osmosis, so to speak.
Well, like you said, I mean, ULI, different groups like that, industry-related groups. I mean, ULI's been tremendous for me as far as being able to learn from other people, connect with other people, find partners. And they also have the mentoring program.
Right, yeah.
So all those things have really helped me in my growth in real estate development.
Correct. I mean, and it's just getting involved. I mean, just participating and reading and listening and watching and looking and always kind of have I was talking to an ex TWRA commissioner. That's the Wildlife Resources Agency that I just was appointed to by the governor, and our meeting in August is in Greenville, Tennessee. They kind of have them across the state. And I said, I have a little airplane, so I said, it might be a fun trip to fly to. And he said, no, don't do that. You should drive and don't go on the interstate, but go the back roads and visit a couple of, different agency facilities like a hatchery or a wildlife management area or something, and learn about it. And, that's kind of, interestingly enough, Mr. Hill used to get mad at our guys and when they'd go out to a store, and if he found out they went on the interstate, he'd get mad because he wanted to go on the back roads to see what's going on.
Right. That's funny you say that. That's like one of my favorite things to do is just
To drive around.
meander on the weekends and just either find new sites or just see
People watch.
Yeah, just see what's going on.
Yeah, people watch and take, always, every time I go somewhere, I always kind of take a different route just to see, and who knows. I mean, across the 440, I've been taking Harding a little bit. It's just a different route, and I just drive by one day and Lipscomb Elementary has bought these 4 houses and they're gone. They got the fencing up. I was like, God, what happened? What did it? And I didn't realize it was so close, but now you can see the backside of the school, and I guess they're going to expand over into.
Yeah, that's one thing I love is just seeing other projects going on, and it goes back to what you're saying. It's like a rising tide lifts all boats. I just love seeing development. I love seeing activity because I feel like that just brings up a community.
Right.
So what would be your one piece of advice for somebody that wants to get into real estate development or real estate investing?
Well, real estate investing is different from real estate development. The real estate development is, learn it from the ground up. I mean, it's not as easy as you think. It's time consuming, it's capital intensive, and, so be patient and learn it, get into property management, get into brokerage, learn everything about the city, learn everything about, zoning regulations. I'm amazed sometimes. I'll say to people, how many people have ever been to the planning commission? Very few raise their hand just to see how that works. How many people have been to a public hearing in Metro Council? Very few have ever done that.
One tonight.
It's tonight, yeah. So just to learn the process and learn the people and learn how it's all happening, and then, work your way into it. And as far as investing, obviously, you got to have capital to invest, and buy something that my mother used to have a stockbroker friend that he would always buy stocks in something he really liked and interested in. He liked the automobile industry, so he'd buy General Motors or Ford or whatever. He wouldn't, that wasn't 100% his philosophy, because he'd buy good value too, but he always sort of bought stuff he liked and was interested in, and so he could I said to my son one time, I said, well, you got $200, you want to buy some stock? And he said, well, I want to buy Dr. Pepper, which was Cadbury Schweppes. I said, well, why do you want Dr. He said, well, because I like it. And I said, okay, so we bought 5 shares or whatever it was, and it doubled its value. So, but he liked it. That's all he kind of knew that, I wanted.
That's funny. My grandpa, when I was I think I was 8 years old, he bought me some shares of McDonald's stock for Christmas.
There you go.
And I still have that today.
There you go.
So it's funny. All right, well, let's jump into our monumental questions.
All right.
So what does success mean to you?
Oh, I'm not a guy, I think success is that, you enjoy what you do, and you produce whatever you're doing. You produce a product that makes people, happy or healthy, or, I don't get into a lot of that touchy-feely stuff per se. But I think, one of the great things about this business is that, here are these drawings, and here's what we say it's going to look like, and when we finish, it looks better than we said it was.
Yeah.
And it works better than we said it would. And we see all the people coming and going and shopping and stay in the hotel, or they rent an apartment, or they're in Green Hills. When we built office over the retail, it was like, we're not sure this is going to work. It's kind of new, but now it's you can't keep them out. I mean, we're 100% full, and people always want to be there because it's such a quality of life issue for them that. They park their car, they can go to lunch, 5 or 6 different locations, they can walk to the Y, they can walk to meet their wife at the movies, and they never have to get back in their car. So I think, in my world, in our world, it's that, you create something that's better than what you even envisioned it to be, and the proof is in the pudding when the people are coming in droves, and your tenants are, it's a, number one Whole Foods in the South. I mean, so obviously it's doing something right.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. It's like seeing the satisfaction of actually like helping improve people's lives and creating an experience for them,
Right.
And a good time.
Yeah. So, and then, that, and then obviously, when you do it right and the numbers work and your stockholders are happy and your board's happy and
everybody's happy.
And everybody's happy. And, then maybe they give me a raise or something.
So do you have a morning ritual or a daily habit?
I get up early, sometimes too early, and usually.
What time do you usually get up?
I was up this morning at 4:30, and I do a round. I'll drink I drink a little bit of coffee and hot chocolate, and watch the morning news and the weather, and feed the dog or walk the dog or feed the cat or whatever, and then I usually go to the gym, and then I come home and. Whether I'm going to a breakfast or I'll fix a smoothie at the house or whatever, and then it's off we go. So yeah, the morning time, I really enjoy the morning time when nobody else is awake and I can kind of do what I need to do, want to do, and people that don't get up early and see the sunrise or watch the wildlife come to life and. All those things that happen in the morning. I couldn't. I wish I could. I had slept past 6 o'clock. Even if I go to bed late, I still wake up. It's just. But the morning time is I think whether you're, at the farm or at the lake or just to kind of do what you want to do and get moving.
Completely agree. That's kind of the me time, the reset time, and really get your day started off right.
But late afternoon is good too. When the sun goes down and it's cooled down and you can, do some piddling out in the yard. I'm a piddler. I'll, fill up the bird feeders. I'll, trim the plants or trim a tree or pick, just whatever, just piddling around.
Yeah. So, do you have a favorite book or book you're currently reading right now?
I don't. I'm just, my reading is tied to, industry publications or hobby publications or reading stories on the internet. Unfortunately, if I try to read a book, it puts me to sleep.
Yeah.
So I'll read pilot magazines or wildlife magazines or emails or stories on the internet. That's sort of. Unfortunately, I'm not a big book reader like my wife and daughter are.
Well, hopefully, or I should say, maybe next time we'll have to do an interview up in the plane.
That's great. Anytime you want to go, as long as you don't get scared.
Yeah, no, definitely.
No pilots like scared passengers.
Well, I appreciate you so much for being on the show.
No problem.
This was a blast. I know our listeners are going to get a lot out of this.
There's a lot to tell. I didn't even get into 10% of the whole.
Yeah, honestly, I feel like we're scratching the surface.
The depth of all the things that go on and how you get there. People, it's kind of my analogy. People just buy a gallon of milk and go home and drink it. They have no idea how the milk got there and all that it took to get there.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And then I feel like we could go on and on. But everyone, if you enjoyed today's episode, please share it on social media. Tell your friends about it. Jimmy, is there any way people can follow with what you're doing or reach out to you?
Sure. Just all my contact information is on our website, and all our projects and properties and press releases and all that has to do with HG Hill is on our website.
And we'll put a link to that in the show notes.
Right.
And everybody, don't forget to share and have a monumental day.